moments help kind of start this Black franchise ownership in McDonald's?
So immediately after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., people are starting to ask a lot of questions. For those of you who remember the types of conversations people were having after the killing of George Floyd, they were very similar. What is business's responsibility? What do we do about economic and financial inequality? People are asking, what can we do? How do we make sure that corporations see themselves as socially responsible actors? The same types of conversations. And so, what McDonald's was conceptualizing at that time was how to solve kind of two problems. One, the urgency of the moment where people are hoping that companies can be accountable. And then the second thing was they had all of these restaurants and communities that didn't want to do business in Black neighborhoods anymore. White franchise owners who saw residential shifts in racial demographics and who weren't down anymore. And McDonald's then said, okay, we can secure our investments by putting in these Black franchisees in places where white people no longer want to do business. And we can start to see ourselves and present ourselves as being on the right side of history. And so that's when you start to see this concerted effort to bring Black people into the franchising system. And those franchises were really successful very, very shortly after Black people had access to them. They were doing really well. And so then you start to see the expansion and the more targeting of the Black consumer.
Yeah, earlier in the book, you talked about these kind of spinoffs that kind of happened. So you had McDonald's. I mean, I guess a good one would have been from McDonald's, you have Taco Bell. And from Taco Bell, you have Del Taco. And then from Marriott, I think you have KFC or some of those small things
Mhm.
were kind of spinning off throughout that time. When Black franchisees got like a Herman Petty or any of those kind of those names that you highlight, was there any Black spinoffs directly from McDonald's? Were there people that were specifically Black franchisees that tried their hand at starting their own restaurants?
Yeah, this is an interesting story because it really highlights the differentials around capitalization and just access to wealth and privilege and lending. There were some Black entrepreneurs who saw what was happening with some of these mainstream franchises and said, look, we should try to build our own. And the second they did that, they were undermined because they just did not have the wealth to compete. So there's a guy who I talk about in the book and who I've done some other projects about called Brady Keys. And he was a member of, he was on the Steelers and he had a really good football career. But back then, you couldn't live on your NFL pension. It wasn't, people were not making brand deals the way that they were. You can not be very good on the field, but if you're kind of charismatic, you can sell products. That was not happening for Black athletes. And that didn't really happen until people like Rosie Greer and OJ Simpson. And so he wanted to start a fried chicken company. He called it All Pro Chicken. And the reason he got into fried chicken was because he couldn't get into car dealership franchising, which was super, super popular with athletes after they retired. So he saw that his only route was to try to do, fast food. So he tries to do All Pro Chicken. And he opens a few stores in Cleveland. He's got a store in New York City. And then the big guys come in, KFC comes in, and those guys can withstand economic instability. They can discount. There's another guy I talk about in my book who tries to do a place called Chicken George's, and it's very popular in the Northeast, in DC and Baltimore. And Popeyes comes in, and they can do discounting, and they can do coupons, and a lot of those kind of startups get acquired by the big guys eventually. They buy their restaurants, they've got the fryers, the materials. And so you start to see that it isn't because people aren't working hard enough or they don't have good ideas. They just don't have the capital to compete.
Yeah.
And so what you do see is that a lot of Black celebrities start to lease out their image and likeness to companies to give the impression that they're Black owned, but they aren't.
Yeah, and to the Chicken George point, because you kind of made that as one of the last efforts. I don't know. Have you seen any more recent efforts? Because I think about something like a Raising Cane's, for example. It started in 1996. You have, I think it was by Todd Graves. He ends up making it $1 billion company because he doesn't franchise it. Did you see any models like that for African American people that were trying to do businesses and they just stuck within without franchising or anything?
I have not seen tons of examples of Black-owned restaurants that don't try to do the franchise model, or Black people who are very successful in the restaurant industry who aren't doing franchises. There's some local places like here in DC, Milk and Honey, that the guy who started it, I think, was a big franchise guy and then did his own restaurants. Franchising is a really, really tricky business and it can get very, very predatory really, really fast. The New York Times recently did a expose of Dickey's Barbecue.
Okay.
And all of these people, a lot of them, US military veterans who are able to access special business loans, have lost so much money because they tell them this is a $300,000 business and the business actually costs $600,000 to run, right? So I have yet to see, I've seen some very successful kind of local regional Black
If you
chains.
enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookumapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.